of you, even though you say not now. I don't have any respect for your personal privacy. Haha, you're in a school, I can take a picture of you, you can't do anything about it.
Damn it. Well, I'm just gonna leave this definition here and simply state that Adam is a bigoted asshole, and we're just gonna move on. I'm gonna go ahead and say that if you disagree with my perspective on this topic, then you are pretty dumb. Not because I'm some egotistical asshole who thinks he's always right, but because there is a lot of bigotry surrounding this game. The people who hate this game have no clue why it's bad, and the people who like this game might miss what makes this game truly great, and are at the very least overlooking some very terrible writing choices. Please feel free to disagree with whatever point I bring up you want, but at least know where I'm coming from, and for the love of all that is good, please bring some decent argumentation. So let's talk about some of the negative reviews I've seen for this game.
Why me? I'm just a geek girl in some small
You're such a geek.
perfect example of strange detractors.
Geek, right?
Yeah, so I'm going to leave this definition here, and we can safely assume that if this had been a movie, Adam would have loved it, and not made such a simple mistake because he is either retarded or a bigoted asshole, and I don't think he's that stupid. Moving on, we have something that is somehow even worse. So this guy, who I don't remember, put up this video called "This is Why Life is Strange is a Bad Game." And it's just this over and over again. Meaning his argument is that because the developers didn't prevent him from doing the same thing over and over again, this is a bad game. And if you reduce it once more, this becomes, because I'm retarded, Life is Strange is a bad game. I think most of my regular viewers will believe me when I say that I've thought about this for a very long time, and I have no clue what to say to that. Other than this.
Chase me, alien. Chase me.
Up next is Steam reviews. Good. So I've come to the conclusion that there are three types of people that dislike this game. Bigoted people that have prejudices against certain types of games because they are not traditional kind of games, whatever the hell that means, even though these games have been around longer than the average gamer has been alive. Next is people like myself who have actual qualms with the game. The problem with them is that they don't go deep enough. I know I always go ankle deep, and I don't expect people to go that hard as well, but I think that people keep it shallow enough to not really appreciate the incompetence in the writing. Quite a few of these people stop at the fact that the choices don't matter at all, which I have to take umbrage with. Now, it is perfectly okay to be upset with that, but what would make this game significantly better would be to take it in the other direction. But since that will involve the ending, might as well wait for that to discuss it. The rest are people that hate the characters because they're pretentious hipster little shits, and I'm willing to bet that this is the majority of people who dislike this game. Which is sad because I don't like it to be that easy to know how retarded you might be. This bothers me on so many levels. First, this is terrible logic. Boil every argument down to its simplest forms and you will find many magical moments being presented as cogent and not stupid, and it's just great. So you don't like pretentious people, and you don't like the pretentious people in this game. How does that make this a bad game? This isn't even talking about the characters not being likable, which is a very shallow understanding of writing. A good example is an apple. You might hate apples, you might find them disgusting, but how does that disgust for apples evaluate the quality of that apple over there on that specific table? I despise guacamole, but that doesn't mean all guacamole is bad, and it doesn't even prevent me from understanding that a classmate of mine's homemade guacamole is a higher quality than the rest I have seen. Again, that apple could be the shittiest apple that has ever appled, but you not liking apples isn't a critique of that apple. This is a lot like not liking Trainspotting because those guys were awful people, and it's one of the many reasons the excuse the characters are not likable isn't valid. This isn't Reality Bites. The characters are not presented in a good light, they just are. It's to the point that one of the major themes in the game is growing up and accepting the consequences of one's actions, and this directly relates to the ending. Where, if you choose the quote-unquote bad ending, it is refusing to deny your own selfish desires to protect a friend who grew up to be a self-righteous asshole who only screwed everything up around her and didn't appreciate the gifts she had. Max literally sacrifices the lives of everyone just to save someone who, by her own admission, doesn't deserve it. So even if you find them unlikable, which I still think they are despite them being kind of terrible people some of the time, that's not even an issue. Second point is that you need to go fuck yourself if you think these characters are even remotely bad in that regard. I know that compared to others, I have no right to complain, but I have some shit to tell. You haven't had to sit there while some dick demeaned an entire medium by calling the artist within it uncreative, while being the least creative person in that very room. You haven't had to deal with an administration that actively disrespects the medium you have chosen to focus on, when that fucking administration offers a program to teach you that very medium. You don't have a teacher that is so fucking bigoted against graphic design and photography that they once defaced a student's senior thesis display because they found it a front to the fine arts. And they didn't even get fired for this. No, you go to Starbucks 3 times a week and have to spend 6 minutes looking at some pretentious tool, and then you whine and complain about how they are ruining your worthless life. Oh, and if you are someone who is more affected than myself and still hate these characters, I get it, but I'm still gonna say you're overreacting a bit.
So anyway, Max wakes up tied to a chair in the dark room. Oh no, how will she get out of this situation? Oh, time travel, yeah, that's right.
Don't do that. That's being cynical for no reason. Then we have Fat Man Falling's review of the 5th episode, and boy are we gonna talk about that. I used to agree that Life is Strange had the worst ending of 2015, but that was before Dreamfall Chapters, and even if the last episode came out in 2016, I couldn't care less. That game now owns the worst ending for 2015, 16, and 17. But since this deals with the ending, we might as well wait to save it for the ending. So let's talk about the generic things I liked before we jump into the thrashing. So this was much better the second time around. So much so that it surprised me. Yeah, who would have thought that the artificial pacing caused by waiting months between consuming the media would weaken the overall quality of the product? Because I did, all 3 times I talked about this. Again, it's pretty obvious that not playing a game is generally worse than playing it, but the amount that it got better really did surprise me. My first time through, I was on the edge between a 3 and a 4, and now a 6 doesn't seem so bad to me, but you're getting a 5 because you're a terrible, terrible game. Things seem to bother me less, and that was with several new things cropping up that caused me to be really butthurt about them. But this one scene in particular made a complete 180 for me, and it drastically improved episode 4. So at the end of episode 3, we changed some stuff, and bam, Chloe is crippled, and this leads me to believe some very interesting things were going to happen. None of those things did, and it really did seem like a pointless melodramatic moment that was only there to have a sad scene and just establish the photo traveling powers. It still is, but it was much harder for me to fixate on that the second time through. While the problems are still there, I found myself okay with the idea of killing the sick Chloe, rather than just trying to alter the past again and save her from the car crash this time, and I even felt genuinely moved when they said their goodbyes. And again, I will defend the dialogue as being extremely natural. Horrifyingly obnoxious and self-centered, but natural. And it is good that we have this. Even before my opinion turned around, kind of, just the very fact that any developer would put anything above graphics is something that not only I approve of, but it shocked me. And though there are some extremely simplistic writing problems in this, even the idea that someone would put writing over the graphics sexually excites me. Because at the end of the day, I'd rather have 100 more Dreamfall chapters than have another Call of Duty or another Assassin's Creed. I'd rather spend hours complaining about terrible writing than do nothing with this aggressive stagnation we've been in for years. But then again, you sure did pay a lot of money for some very shitty writers, or decent writers making some very obvious mistakes. But enough of that prattle, let's get to why this game is bad. And 3 seconds in, we already hit a major problem. Some people wonder why I don't summarize the plot when I review things. First, it's because I rarely review things that are new, and the people who view my videos tend to be the people who have already consumed the media, and I think it would be pretty condescending to them to tell them what they already know. And I don't have an active fan base large enough to warrant explaining the plot, especially when the few people that do watch me only want to see me burn the world to the ground. But I think explaining the plot of the first episode will help the rest of this review. So Max walks around in the rain and sees a tornado and then wakes up back in the classroom and then takes a selfie like some kind of asshole. After being a dick, she puts on headphones and walks around for a little bit. After making it to the bathroom, she watches her friend die and then somehow rewinds time. Then towards the end of the episode, she goes right back to the tornado, and then jumping ahead to the very end of the game, we find out that the tornado was caused by Max rewinding time, and she now has to choose whether to kill Chloe or kill the rest of the town. But that's everything important structurally, so that's all we're going to recap. So the tornado foresight in the first episode does two bad things. The first is it creates a time paradox, and not the kind that's in the first two Terminator movies that can be easily ignored because of how great those movies are, but a baffling paradox, as it could have easily been avoided because they should have seen it coming 8 months in advance, or just by changing one simple thing. So how does the time paradox work? It starts out with Max's time powers giving her a premonition of the effects of her time travel powers, then suddenly developing her time travel powers, and that creates the tornado which kills everyone, which was in the premonition that her time travel powers gave her. Which means that before she developed her abilities told her what the effect of her using her abilities would end up being. And though it would still have some problems, all you need to do to get around this time paradox is just not have the first of the 2 times you travel to the future. The only difference between the 2 instances is that the second time tells us that it is indeed the future. And if you think you need to have the first time because it sets the mood for the game very well, then have it be a cutscene or something that is not us directly controlling it, because it is much easier for me to believe a dream or a vision or just a normal premonition that doesn't involve actor-player involvement over having time travel powers before she had time travel powers. The second thing it does is really convolute the world building and adds a time travel ability that she never uses. So Max has 3 different time travel powers. The first is the 5-minute rewind period where she can just keep rewinding back to the same point over and over again. All good there. Then she gets this ability to travel back to a photo's 5 minutes and change things that happened around that time frame of the photo, and then that changes the future like in the butterfly effect. Can be convoluted, but at least I'm on board and it does make some sense. Then the third are these scenes where she seems to travel forward in time for no reason and she doesn't stay where she is. So this only happens twice and in one episode, so it seems like this was something that was not caused by her. I mean, I actually thought this was the case up until the very end, because they hint at something else being the reason for the time travel wackiness. Which made more sense because otherwise she had a power she could never control and only use twice. Chekhov's time paradox. Which also means that...
Teleport!
She can't teleport. Either because she can't teleport or because it's not something in the game. You knew that when you uploaded that video, Adam. So let's just say that because of the ending, the beginning is not the best. Skipping ahead a bit because the first episode is pretty solid, we have 3 things. First isn't a real problem, but holy shit, Max, you are a dick. I can see not writing letters back and forth because 1, writing letters sucks, and 2, if you don't have each other's emails, then it becomes harder to contact one another. But after years, you get back, and even after a month, you still haven't went to see her? Sure, day 1, you're moving and you're tired and all of that, but by day 2, you should be going to her house to see her. Like, you ditch school if that's getting in the way, and you hang out with your best friend. You do this kind of crap when you hate your friend, and though it could be the case, that would be surprising to me. Damn, Max, this is why people hate you. That's not true. They hate you for superficial reasons, but that's what I'm going to attribute it to. And second is this. No matter how good something is, I hate seeing this every single time. Like my favorite games that are not going meta, and this pops up and it just ruins the mood. Just don't do this. First, you are drawing attention to the fact that what we are watching, reading, or playing isn't real life, and is directly affecting my suspension of disbelief. Second is, it's just obnoxious. And I have had people say things like, this is real life, not a video game, or some such things, but that's normally just someone talking down to me in the conversation, so just don't do it. Just say, boy, you are dumb, or that's unrealistic. And last is this. Now I know people are stupid, like assuming someone being brown means they're a terrorist level of stupid. Yes, this is realistic, but that's not the kind of stupid I find redeemable, and I'd much rather not see a video game based around someone so stupid. Of course she doesn't say something this stupid again, but that doesn't stop this from being profound. Global warming is gonna kill us all. But in case you are like all of those stupid people out there talking about things you have no knowledge for, global warming is not magic. No matter what happens, the physics of all of matter isn't going to change. Water will still have the same melting, freezing, and boiling point, even if the average world temperature is 200 degrees. Episode 2 is where the cracks start to show. It starts out fine enough with Max proving to Chloe that she does have the powers, which is good, but if you let me go on a rant, I would tell you what would have been preferable for me. What would have been easier to prove that she had these powers was just to take all of the crap from her pockets and then just rewound time and just slapped that onto the table. For some reason, the only person who is arrogant with his time travel powers is Echo, and he is a little dumb about it. Why aren't more characters more arrogant? I'm a massive arrogant asshole, and I'm just a little strong and a little more intelligent. If I had time travel powers, I would be unbearable. But you couldn't do anything about it because I have rewound powers, you sorry son of a bitch. Then they head off to the shooting range and several things happen at once. First, Max starts bleeding some more and blacks out. Now she started bleeding in the diner, and that worried me, but here this was telling me that very shortly we're going to have problems. Both in-game and, more important, structurally. I'm just going to say that you shouldn't do this. If someone that has something that could eventually hurt them, don't do that in your story. If you have a character using time travel in your story, and in that story using that ability hurts them until they can't do it, don't do that. Most people can't handle that, and it often feels really manipulative or contrived. Here especially so, since the only reason this happens in this game is to add unneeded drama to a scene because for some reason you lose your powers. But if you have to do this for whatever reason, have the really bad effect happen later in the game. How this makes sense is that the powers are draining her and eventually she uses them too much and it hurts her. But this is the second episode, meaning more than half of the game is left, which I then predicted that they would simply ignore it for the rest of the game because nothing else would make sense. This is like throwing a baseball 10,000 times. Naturally, you could develop a repetitive stress injury, but only after doing that action many times. In this game, she breaks her arm in half after the first 1,000 throws, and then keeps using that arm to throw the ball another 9,000 times, and it just gets a little sore around the 9,000 mark. Then we get this weird problem where we don't gun down Frank for some reason. So Max was abusing her powers to allow Chloe to not waste any ammo, and we clearly fire 4 shots and break 6 bottles. So if we choose to shoot Frank, why doesn't he die? There are 2 reasons for this. 1, Chloe can't count to 6, and 2, the writers didn't want to have to write around the fact that Max shot a guy in questionable circumstances, which is weird because Chloe gets to murder the crap out of him, but I can't? That's fair. This is the last time I will mention Adam, but this one is the worst offense because all you had to do was look at the screen to notice the error. This isn't not knowing a definition. This isn't just being a stuck-up asshole not appreciating being called a stuck-up asshole. This is not observing the things in front of you. So what I'm talking about is Chloe getting her foot caught when the railroad switched over. I missed why she was stuck the first time through because of that whole trying to enjoy the story thing, but the second time through, I couldn't help but notice they were sitting strangely close to the place where the train switches over. Like, you can't sit anywhere else? So, Adam, next time just say it's contrived, because otherwise, you think these train junctions just softly moves over to where it needs to be. It's not like 10,000 tons of train could derail otherwise. Or at least make fun of the clipping issues.
This point already. Laura?
See, no matter how much I might find you intellectually infuriating, if you make me laugh, I will still be subscribed to you. But just take my word for it and don't watch these awful videos. Then we get to the part where Kate tries to kill herself and we just steal all of the agency away from her. And at this point, your brain should be saying, so this is why she is having health problems now. Which is sad because there was never any tension in this scene for me because if you're playing this game like you ought to be and not just being a passive-aggressive dick about it, you should be exploring and talking with people. And paying attention to pretty basic details and concepts. Meaning, you already know how to save Kate, so it doesn't matter if you have your time travel powers or not. Still, not a bad scene, but there didn't need to be a sign flashing in my face telling me to feel sad, that's for sure. What the hell are you guys yelling at each other about? The rumors have been circulating for days. You are both extremely childish. Well, one of you's a child and the other one's a serial killer. Episode 3 was much better because nothing that ruined the narrative was brought up and everything works a-okay. But there are two things I want to talk about. First, this scene. I'm not sure why so many people say this game has this lesbian agenda in it. One kiss doesn't make you gay, and to my knowledge, there is only one character that even has the possibility of being gay. And the game only kind of hints at Chloe being sexually attracted to Amber, so there's this chance that there are no gay people in this game. So where is all this outrage coming from? Is it just the fact that the two main characters are female? Because that would be stupid. The other thing is Max's response to Joyce calling him out for breaking into the school at night. Just tell her you went swimming in the pool. You're not going to get into that much trouble for it. For you, it would be breaking curfew, and for Chloe, it would be trespassing. I think Joyce is understanding enough to look past something that's small and insignificant. Then you cripple Chloe, and things get really interesting, and not in the good way. So I love this scene. It's so good, and both times I went through it. And it has a bunch of subtle nuances in it that are amazing. To the point where it makes me question if the dialogue and the overall narrative are written by different people, because one is great and the other one is not so good. So everything is fine until you choose to kill Chloe or not. This is a problem for two reasons. First, this just stops being a thing seconds after you do it, so why even give us the choice? It doesn't matter if you kill her or not, because you're about to rewrite 5 years of history again. And the one choice is just better in both idea and execution, so why not just give us the one? The second is more personal and far less important matter because it's what could have been that bothers me. After changing the time once, she just reverses it, and that's the end of that. I had all these hopes about Max trying to convince Chloe again that she has the time powers, and then either trying to save her again, or just give Chloe the actual agency she has been demanding from Max in the first place. What would have worked really well was if Max kept trying to save Chloe and terrible things kept happening to her. This way, the reason she goes back to the original timeline was because she failed, rather than just trying once and leaving the scene in this awkward place of it seeming poorly paced and just setting up the time photo travel. This would also fit well with the growing up motif because she got herself into this mess because she was playing God with her time powers. When she then realizes what she was doing, she then understands the implications of great power and mild responsibility. The last part is that it would give us a single clue that Max saving Chloe was the reason behind all the bad going on. So many things hint at other things being the cause, and even though they are red herrings, you can't help but add them to the other pieces. And you could say that the opening scene could be a clue about that, but the time paradox really makes that seem illogical. Also, it wouldn't hurt to have more than just one hint. Also, don't burn that photo, you asshole. That's the last photo of the both of you together before you moved away and her dad dies. The next problem is when Chloe and Max tries to get the cipher from Frank when they are doing their best Hardy Boys impression. Now I like this on a mechanical level. Not the deepest puzzle, but a fun bit trying to figure out what the correct combination is. But this is retarded on a narrative level. So the first thing you do is get Chloe to shoot and kill both Frank and his dog. She then takes the cipher from Frank and walks away. Yeah, not smart. Hey Chloe, you've been Max's Louise for 3 days now. You should at least know how the powers work on a very basic level. Give Max the piece of paper so she can rewind and not have you kill Frank or even talk to him for that matter. Why you gotta make this harder than it has to be? The party works for the most part, but there is one thing that really bothers me, and it would fix a lot of little dialogue hiccups. Tell people you found Rachel's dead body buried in the junkyard. Don't warn people that Nathan is dangerous. They already know that. Tell people you found Rachel's dead body and have photographic evidence that Nathan did it. Max, why didn't you hit me up when you needed to get a dress? Oh, it was just one of those days. No, you say, we found Rachel's dead body, we know Nathan did it, and I'm sorry I didn't have time to change. Max, you're not cool enough to be back here. Fuck you, and Nathan killed Rachel and buried her in the junkyard, you asshole. Save so much time and just makes more sense that way.
It was something to observe. Came in close, I heard a voice. My heart going boom, boom, boom.
Then we hit episode 5, and boy does the poo-poo hit the fan. It starts out well enough as you're about to be killed by your teacher, and I was more than happy that they went dark with this game. But all's well that doesn't end well. So the first thing isn't really important, it just bothered me, so I might as well talk about it. So Max almost fixes everything, and she finds herself at a highfalutin art show where she has a piece on show. You walk up to it, and it's this massive piece on the wall, and I have to question this logic. First off, it's a Polaroid, so it produces a very small image. Now, some professionals still use this, but it's a very rare occurrence, and a teacher at my school did use a Polaroid in her last show, and it was exceptionally well done. The weird thing was that her Polaroids were presented on the wall, and I am to believe that that is normal if not expected. Polaroids are a high quality image, but it's still small, and you wouldn't enlarge it all that much without doing a lot of work to remove the pixelation. Or I guess you could just digitally enlarge it, but that would be a really shitty image. I could be wrong about this, but I think I know what I'm talking about, and I know this is a non-issue for anyone else. I just thought a game about photography would be a little more accurate about photography. Welcome back, Fat Man Falling. Now, I'm not as mad at him, but he does do similar things as Adam does, which is incredibly depressing. He does 3 things in this review that just doesn't address anything, and I find it so problematic. 80% of his video revolves around 3 things. One has been misconstrued but doesn't matter, one that doesn't exist at all, and the other that doesn't matter, and he kind of hints at this.
Only because it feels like the theme of selfishness was tacked on at the last minute after they had already wrote the end of the game.
You only wanted to be popular. And once you got these amazing powers, your big plan was to trick people into thinking you give a rat's ass.
So this is 2-pronged. First is he is just wrong about that scene. He didn't show it, but that scene does directly address what elements in the game it was referring to, most of which didn't involve Chloe. This is why you don't use a meme as anything other than a joke, because used as an argument, it is retarded. The scene is referring to dozens upon dozens of times Max would rewind after having a conversation, and then use that information she just received to blatantly manipulate the person she is talking to. You do this a lot. Now, for the most part, you don't ever have to do this, but this is what the game is based around, so that would be your fault for not noticing. Now, is this Fat Man's fault for not caring and not getting into the game because he didn't like it? Or is it because it's been 6 months since he played those parts? Doesn't matter, it's a bad critique. He said episode 5 was tacked on, then only shows the one scene that feels tacked on when he says this. So I'm going to assume he means that this scene just doesn't fit and it feels tacked on, which it does. The only problem with that point is that the scene is so poorly done that being tacked on is irrelevant. We will talk about it later, but I was laughing so hard at something that was supposed to be sad and dour. He then harps about the fact that you can save these people, but it doesn't matter.
Alright, Warren, thanks for the picture. Time to go back in time. Good luck dying in that explosion. Because, you know, if she's here at the lighthouse, nobody's helping that trucker. Who's stopping this flaming gas leak from blowing up the diner? Really? Nobody?
He harps on this a lot, which is ignoring the inevitable that just completely disproves his position. He's right, it doesn't matter, but not because she uses the photograph to change time, but because of the ending. He justifies this belief by going on this massive tangent in which he tries to contemplate the time paradox without understanding that it is a time paradox, which he then believes it is related to the gameplay mechanics when it isn't, and it is just a contrived plot device. This somehow leads to the final decision not working as it is because apparently the tornado will follow Chloe forever.
The Sacrifice Arcadia Bay ending doesn't imply that some other Final Destination style bullshit is going to continue to try to kill Chloe.
Yes, it does. You can bring up anything you want, but that is what the game is saying. It might not be logical, but that is clearly what is being implied. I mean, they don't do it with the elegance that it should have, but it is most certainly the implication. The starting point is saving Chloe. The almost childish level of chaos theory being hammered in on several occasions, and the dozens of visual references shown again and again saying, hey, numbnuts, your decisions have consequences. As presented in-game, it is a direct choice between Chloe and everyone else. His counter-argument to this is naive at best.
Max had her powers when she went back in time 5 years and was able to use them, and I'm sure in 99% of cases she did use them. So wouldn't she have to go back to that point if using her powers even once is what caused this tornado?
No, Fat Man. No, you wouldn't. Time travel in Life is Strange is linear, and you can only travel back in time, so there is no multiverse or splitting timelines or any of that jazz. And if you want to bring something up against that, save it for when I have my 40-minute video on why the real-world scientific reasoning for the multiverse is the dumbest thing ever thought of. This diagram shows what happens in the game. Monday, she gains the ability to rewind a bit. Wednesday, she gains the ability to travel to a photo's time, or send her consciousness back into her body, but that doesn't matter, she goes photo traveling. And with this, she goes back 5 years and saves Chloe's dad. but then reverse that, putting the timeline back to where it should. Then at the end of the game, if you choose to kill Chloe, you go back in time to Monday and prevent Max from gaining any powers, which completely alters the timeline again, preventing everything that happened in the game from happening. Falling says that because you don't return back to the very first time you traveled, you haven't gotten rid of all the time travel stuff, and so the tornado is inevitable no matter what you do. This is wrong for two reasons. First is, how does she travel back 5 years when she prevented herself from using any time travel powers and therefore doesn't go back 5 years ago? The arrow follows a very simplistic pattern. Forward, 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 back, forward, until the end of the week, and then back, and then forward forevermore. Again, how can she time travel when she can't time travel? Second, even if you don't agree with this objective assessment, then you have to agree with that she wouldn't use her time powers the second time around because the entire purpose of that was to return to the original timeline. The second journey overwrites the first. So no matter what you say, the last choice overwrites everything no matter what pretend circumstance you might want to project onto this game. Also, Max is 90 pounds. What you missed was the fact that Chloe could wrestle a knife out of the hands of Frank, who is much bigger than her, and so she should have at least tried to not get shot. The fact that even the existence of the tornado was a massive continuity error, and the third time Max goes back in time before she actually develops the time travel powers. Just be a little more perceptive next time. I didn't do this to dog on Falling. Adam, yes, because fuck anyone who thinks video games is a lesser medium, but it was to further the point I made earlier in the video. I have no clue why no one is capable of reviewing this with a level head. I know there has to be a few others out there who like or dislike this game more than me, but they have to be saying the same thing. A hatred of the characters, a hatred of the gameplay, or a love of the story makes them bigoted and clouds their judgment. Now back to talking about how awful Episode 5 is. Episode 5 starts out fine enough even though we start about 50 different sessions of wandering through photos, but since nothing breaks, it's a-okay. But as she leaves, we get something that rustled my jimmies a bit. She's driving and we get a voice message from Nathan explaining all the information we already know. But that's not the problem. When did he record that message? Assuming that it took a few hours for the fight song to kill and bury Nathan, I think Nathan had to be dead no later than 8 at night. And by the pacing, it feels like he would have been dead sometime before evening, but that's just speculation. But even if it was 8, that means that he left this message well before Max got to the party, which means either Max is the biggest asshole around for getting both Victoria and Chloe killed and herself captured, or her phone was conveniently dead. Not sure which is worse. Then there's this scene, I can't tell if it's retarded or just had the worst execution I've ever seen. So Max has this weird time acid trip after going back into a photo for the millionth time. This is supposed to get dour, and it starts out interesting with birds smashing against the window, and you get kind of excited. Max starts talking about how she wants to have sex with a psychopath, and then right after that you enter this puzzle that by itself might not be that bad, but it's extremely annoying because you walk so slow. Look, it's Josh complaining about walking speed again. So until you figure it out, you spend so much time just slowly walking down the same hallway over and over again. And what makes moments like this great is not confusing people. And that's all that happens for a while. You go into the cutscene at the beginning of the game, except everything is going backwards. Then we are playing hide and seek from the teacher, and then later from other people, and you just don't know what's going on. Is this neat? I don't know, I guess. I just wish we went back to the story. Then we have the 5 minutes where Chloe teases Max, which is written incredibly childish, and yet from her perspective I can see it working because she is a child, but damn is this dumb. The whole time I'm either grinning over how incompetent this whole thing has been, or just annoyed about how long this goes on until you get to the end-all of be-all of the god-tier writing. You're forced to sit in a snow globe and watch Chloe's dad walk out to his death. Max, could you tell my wife and child that I love them very much? And it wouldn't hurt to remind them that you were the cause of my death. But if you think that's nothing, you're in for a treat, because guess who decides to text us and give us a good old threat? That's right, Frank's dog, with such a deep and intellectual message of, bitch, do not mess with Frank, or me, you got a snack. How do you read that and not hear Scooby's voice in your head?
Bitch, do not mess with Frank or me. You got Scooby snack?
Well, this whole mess isn't all bad. I do like some of the imagery, like the bird smashing into the windows. I really like that everyone was frozen in this scene, and the not max really does disrespect the shit out of you, and I like that. Then we have one last thing to talk about before we move from this scene, and that is plagiarism. If this scene seems oddly familiar to you, it's because you've played Dreamfall chapters, and this scene was ripped from that. It was weird to sit there and see that someone just rip a thing from another game, but I really couldn't be all that mad at Life is Strange because it did it better. The Not Zoe said some really stupid crap, and I think the Dreamfall guys saw this because they see not far after this shows up in the last chapter of Dreamfall, and I couldn't help but notice that too. Which is really funny because the petty gripe between these two showed that even when Dreamfall is stealing from a better game, they have to ruin it as well. Which is really sad because they had like 5 months to not ruin the scene they stole, and yet they did. Damn, that was a not good game. Moving on. And we get to the ending, and this breaks everything. Outside of this choice making the game insist upon itself, this choice takes a narrative, while linear it is still pretty varied, and reduces it to nothing but the ending of Mass Effect, but with a second choice. And what's worse is the choice that retains the most of the game is the not good choice. Cade is still alive, so all of that still happened, and David's narrative is still there if he is still inside of the bunker, which might be the case.
No, Max, you promised you'd make the correct decision. You promised!
So the two options are kill everyone. This includes Joyce and Warren because whether or not the explosion gets to them, the tornado would have. But everything that happened in the narrative still happens, which is tempting because it would sour good moments otherwise. Or kill Chloe and none of the game happens, which is the better option. What makes this choice worse is that one ending has some effort put into it and the other one doesn't. Could you not be such a selfless bitch, Chloe, and just try looking for your mom rather than just looking a little sad at the fact that everyone died in order to save you?
Hey, Josh, what did you mean by the tornado being a continuity error?
Oh yeah, that thing that I've been hinting at throughout all of this review is the one thing that could have made this game a lot better. So yeah, the tornado is a massive continuity error. Or, to be correct, the tornado isn't the problem, it's the precursor that is, but I love being dramatic, and the tornado being wrong makes for a much better game. So the ending does a lot more than I brought up, but I can forgive a lot of them if I envision the ending I've thought up using the context presented in the game. So birds just die sometimes, and whales getting beached isn't a problem, so all good there. But the lunar eclipse is something else. The amount of energy necessary to force the moon out of orbit is kind of insane. And then that turns into a tornado, which would be like spinning the moon just a little bit faster for a very short amount of time. So if destroying the entire planet is a little too much for you, we should be able to agree that at the very least, the West Coast should be wiped off the face of the Earth. And I think this option would be for the best. As of now, the game comes to an abrupt end with this choice between killing Chloe and getting rid of every single choice you've made in the game so far, and saving Chloe and keeping only some of the choices you've made so far. And when the game tells us choice matters over and over again, it comes off insulting to your fans, which is why a bunch didn't like the game. With the Earth being destroyed, none of the choices matter and you come off as an asshole, but the meta commentary is awesome to me. So yes, people would still be mad, but this alleviates the condescending tone of telling us that choices matter and then have the game's narrative not matter at all because it forced us into a situation that makes us erase it. With our hands being forced, it makes us reevaluate what the message is, and it would have to be that choice isn't in-game. The choice is to play the game. By playing the game, you are starting the vicious cycle of the game deleting itself, and this wouldn't happen without you. Very little in this world actually addresses the act of choosing the media we consume, and I think this would be the first time anyone would apply some kind of observer effect to a video game. And I know it's meta and heady and doesn't apply to anything, but without this explanation, the end ruins everything, and it's extremely condescending and insulting and has way more flaws than we discussed. So, fuck it, I'll pretend. So the too long didn't read summary would be, I liked a lot of this and hated or was disappointed by some of it. I really liked the text messaging back and forth and that a bunch of it happened without you knowing about it. I really liked the music when it wasn't the worst thing ever.
In my mind, in a future 5 years from now.
And I think the dialogue is fantastic. But the writing problems in the narrative are so bad that it does soil the rest of the game. It doesn't ruin it for me, but I would understand if it ruined the game for you.